We've developed a system of fire safety for government-owned buildings. That presentation introduced the public service to, I think we're calling building emergency procedures. We're establishing them in about 40 or more government buildings, most of the major buildings in the Brisbane CBD. And what it is, it includes a training software which is located on GovNet under building emergency procedures so that all agencies can get access to it. And you're going to get a demonstration of part of that today. What we're offering with the building emergency procedures for government-owned buildings is a process that agencies or occupants of buildings become totally compliant. But under the Building Fire Safety Regulations 2008, it's a requirement for all occupants of buildings to train all their staff annually in general evacuation procedures, and every 2 years in the first response evacuation procedures. The Queensland Fire and Rescue Service and Concept Safety Systems have got together and they've produced a training package which focuses on those two forms of training for all staff. It's training that can be put into leased buildings, and we have several members from the QFRS here today. In fact, I'll be handing over to Bruce Byatt in a moment, who will give you the first part of the presentation, and then John Hummelstad from Concept Safety Systems will follow on later. Bruce.
I was asked to probably talk today about the building emergency procedures and the ancillary training products, but why is BEP important? And before I actually get into discussing, I suppose, the BEP, I thought I'd probably put a little bit of framework around that. And what I wanted to talk about were two other points, and the two other points are business continuity plans, more generally within the government sector, and the thing that I'm most, I suppose, familiar with, which is being a fire commander trying to manage a significant or major incident. And now I'm going to play a little video. There we go. That's so if you get a bit bored with me, you can just watch the video. Business continuity planning is an integral part, I suppose, of government life, and it sits in most agencies that we all have to put together our business continuity plans, and we do those for a range of reasons. The reason I'm probably talking about that today is I actually see that the BEPs are a component of that in terms of caring and looking after the wellbeing of people. The reason I want to discuss that also is that in our industry, I'm exceptionally aware that every time we do something, we are investigated fully. And what that means is that if you put your BCPs in place and something occurs, they will be examined totally. So will all of the acts, the doctrines, the legislation and all other things that sit around them. They will be turned over with a microscopic view. And the extent of those reviews will always be linked to the scale, the intensity and the impact of the event. And I'd counsel that no one could have anticipated this level of attack on the World Trade Centre. And the scale of that is truly off the clock. But it's not unreasonable to expect that you will have those sorts of events in any building. 343 firefighters lost their lives trying to save the people who were still in those buildings. Some of the occupants sheltered in place and they were waiting for instructions to evacuate. Those instructions never came. As a fire commander, this is my second point I want to move to before, I suppose, trying to link it up to the BEP. I've long held the view that as I make the decisions coming in to try and manage these sorts of incidents, to hold the inquiry first. So I actually ask myself the questions, what will somebody else ask of me in terms of the actions I undertook in dealing with whatever the emergency might be? So I'm putting that to yourselves. So you must plan, you must practice, and you must measure, and you must manage all of the things that you do in terms of business continuity planning, dealing for managing emergencies, and then responding in kind. And it's likely that if you follow those simple steps, you'll pass the reasonable management test. And I can tell you the lawyers will all come along later and they'll ask the questions such as, was that reasonable for you to have done that? We all understand that we have a duty of care to legislation, and the Building Fire Safety Regulation, as stated by Geoff, and also the Workplace Health and Safety Act, make it implicit that we prepare and train and have management structures or plans in place to deal with these sorts of things. When we do our annual, our triennial and our quinquennial inspections under that building fire safety regime, it's quite amazing the number of buildings we go into where people are non-compliant. They don't have their training information and records up to speed. They haven't done their evacuation drills and programs. And annually, and through those inspection regimes, we find a lot of non-compliant buildings. So the rhetorical question, I suppose, for you today is, does that sound familiar? Is that your building? QFRS and CSS are here to help you achieve both competence and compliance with the building regulations and your WH&S obligations. In my view, the BE product is second to none, and I'm sure John's team, when they demonstrate this shortly, will confirm that for you. The aim of today is to articulate how you can ensure your people are trained, skilled, practised and ready should an emergency arise. And that starts with, I suppose, simple evacuation of the building and your means to demonstrate your diligence in that regard. I consider the BEP important because when emergencies occur on a catastrophic scale, the pre-planning, the training and the preparation that you've put in and done beforehand will truly reflect in the outcome you achieve.
Hi there, folks. Firstly, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I think it's really important. The message is really clear, obviously from Bruce and also Geoff. And I'm going to give you a bit of a view of who CSS is, where we fit in this category, but also how BEP as a product came about, because it's very specific to the requirements of government. So Concept Safety Systems, in 2008, won a tender to commercialise the Queensland government-owned IP, owned by Queensland Fire and Rescue. And that was known as FEP or BEP. It was an offering specifically designed around the requirements of the state government requirements for building fire safety. And I'd like to thank Geoff and his team and Bruce and his for helping us to design the offering and services that are required to deliver this service to leased and owned buildings for the government. So what is BEP? It's site specific. We actually take your floor plans and we design the fire reference points as well as the egress paths as well as everything relevant to an emergency situation into a content managed portal so that you're able to do training in your own pace, it's flexible and it's at the time when you need to do it. It's interactive, so as when we demonstrate this with Eric, you'll see that it's easy to use and it's fun to use. It's cost effective. The face-to-face alternative is difficult because you have to structure a course at a particular time. You have to ensure that if you're paying for 20 people, you get 20 people in the room. And I know that's always like herding cats. And then you've got to ensure that those 20 take it in and understand it. And under the regulation, that's meant to be done within 2 days. So it's a very difficult thing to do. If you do it online, you achieve the same level of compliance, but you're doing it in a completely flexible way. And it's also compliant. The full service, it's hosted, and it can be hosted by SciTech on GovNet or by CSS. We have clients that do both. We have telephone and support in business hours and email after. All of the legislation, all the legislative changes that occur as a result are updated automatically. The evacuation signs, like the one at the back of the room, they're also included in the total offering, as well as the annual inspection and all of the services that Bruce mentioned in his presentation. And so at the end of the day, we've put together a package that delivers ease of procurement and ease of compliance so that it's one service offering. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Eric Sheehan. Eric, like Bruce, is a 35-year veteran of the fire service, is with Concept Safety and was one of the original tailors of the program.
All right, so what I'm going to do today is I'll take you through a couple of examples of some places that we currently have it in. And as John said before, we've now got it in over 400 different organisations, literally thousands of buildings and literally tens of thousands of people using the program to be compliant to the Building Fire Safety Regulation. So I'll show you the program, and it's just important that I show you the program, but I explain to you why the program does what it does. It has been specifically designed to meet the requirements of the Building Fire Safety Regulation. So the program, as you can see, has a number of buttons to the left-hand side of the screen. Now, each of those buttons has a specific function. The very first time you use the program is probably the only time you really need to view the instructional demo. From there, the program itself is fairly intuitive. It has an interactive floor plan, as John explained earlier, because the Building Fire Safety Regulation is very specific. It says that the occupier of the building must ensure that the persons working in that building know the location of the fire reference points. There's no other real way of doing that unless you can display where they're located on the floor plans. So we incorporate the floor plans as well. So let's have a look at the emergency procedures. Now, these have been designed specifically for DPW buildings. And you can see in there it has such things as security measures, emergency actions, alert and evacuation procedures, phone threat checklist, personal threat checklist, suspect mail, medical emergencies, after disaster actions, etc. And there are many clients that we've got where we tailor this information and actually add or remove some of that information depending on their needs and wants. We've also incorporated information about the warden structure for that building. And when we build the program, we visit the site and we look at the warden structure in place and we advise whether or not it needs changing, or we include what's already working for the client and put that into it. Now, the Building Fire Safety Regulation says that a person who starts work in a building must receive instruction within 2 days of commencing work in the building. And that instruction must include the location of the fire reference points for the building and the procedures for evacuation. FEP does that, and it does it by using the floor plans. So if I've just started work in this building, and because I'm really important, I'm on a high pay level, they gave me a corner office, and I need to know how to get out, I can just simply click there and it'll show me an appropriate route to take to get to an exit within that building. If I need to know how to evacuate from the building and where to go once I've got out, clicking on the assembly area icon will bring up a site plan of the building, show me the routes to take to get to that place of safety, to that place of assembly. You'll see also here that it's flashing the assembly area at the Botanical Gardens. If I click there, it will also give me a photo identification of where I need to enter. It will also give me information about what I need to do when I get to the assembly area. Now, there are other icons along the bottom as well. So if I put my cursor over one of those and click, it will give me information about the exit signs and their purpose and their reason. And again, evacuation signs. It is a requirement in the Building Fire Safety Regulation that all buildings have evacuation signs appropriately placed along the evacuation routes within the building. Now, we supply them as part of the package. Also, too, in relation to the evacuation tones, again, it tells us someone new in the building what the evacuation tone's purpose is and what I need to do when I hear them. And as I go along, you will see it'll bring up other icons, the location of the fire extinguishers, the hose reels, the internal hydrants, the manual call points, the warden intercommunication points, the whip phones. So whatever's specific to that building will be included on the diagram. So now I've been through that, I've now done the first part of general instruction. I now know the location of the fire reference points. Now, the other thing the Building Fire Safety Regulation requires of all occupiers within a building is that they know how to use the fire equipment within the building, and they know how to raise an alarm using manual call points, etc. That must be done as soon as practicable of a person starting work in the building, but no later than 1 month. So you'll see here there's an extinguisher icon on the bottom. If I click on that, it will run a video.
Dry powder fire extinguisher.
So the videos go for no more than 2 minutes. It's specific to that piece of equipment. It'll tell you what it looks like, how to use it, what to use it on, and what to do when you're finished with it. And as I said, depending on the type of equipment on that floor, that's what we would show. So the videos built within BEP will allow the occupier to provide that adequate instruction. So what the program will also do is, you'll see here there's also information there about the emergency control organisation. If I click on that, it will bring up the warden structure for that particular building. Now, the reason why all that information's in there, because the Building Fire Safety Regulation says it has to be. So this program allows for all that. And also too, we've included compliance information. Every building in Queensland other than a Class 1 building has to have a written fire evacuation plan. And the Building Fire Safety Regulation allows for the written fire evacuation plan to be in electronic format. This program becomes a written fire evacuation plan for the building as well as doing the training. The Building Fire Safety Regulation, as well as Bruce says, after every bit of training there needs to be records kept as proof that's been done. The program also will capture all the training records and is designed in such a way that it can produce those records on request should one of these handsome young uniformed gentlemen turn up and request it. Now again, if the fire service come knock on your door, as they can under the Building Fire Safety Regulation, and say, show me a record of instruction, and you'll see that looks very, 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 very similar to that of the record of instruction form that the fire service want to see within their documentation. And I'll record that. That could be printed out and handed to the attending fire officer. And they would be satisfied then that the regulation has been met. But it is an online program. You want to make sure that people have used it and they do understand it. And it then records the time they did the instruction, the date they did the instruction, the name of the person who did the instructions, how many attempts they made to pass it, all recorded within there. So that just about finishes my demonstration on BEP. As I said, the program is designed that we can build it up or build it down depending on the user's requirements.